Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. For several years now, the best affordable Japanese chronograph, and therefore the default choice in that category, has been the Seiko Speed Timer. A couple of different case sizes, a bunch of different dial colours, solar quartz movement, sapphire crystal and a decent enough bracelet make this one a compelling overall package. But there's a new contender, a new challenger from the throne, and it's from Seiko's arch rival Citizen. Today we're going to check out the new Citizen ProMaster Sky Navihawk chronograph CA4660 and determine whether or not it's the new #1. Big shout out to subscriber and friend of the channel Chris up in Queensland. He got in touch with me last week and offered to send me his watch on loan for review. Thank you again, Chris, for your generosity. Let's flip the camera and have a look at it. All right, let's get into it. Let's see if we can work out the areas where the Citizen is better than the Seiko, not better than the Seiko, or just the same as the Seiko. Navihawk. Sounds like an 80s action hero, does it not? Now, I should declare my bias. I like Citizen. My daily is a Citizen Chronomaster, but I also like the Seiko Speed Timer, having bought a couple of them myself over the last couple of years anyway. So model number of this one, CA4664-60W, featuring the caliber B620. One area where Citizen definitely surpasses Seiko is the warranty. If you're buying a Citizen from an authorized dealer here in Australia, you get a 5-year warranty, which is absolutely fantastic. You can only get that if you buy a Seiko from the Seiko store here in Australia, in which case you're paying full retail, whereas authorized dealers here in Australia, you're not paying full retail for the Citizen. Segueing smoothly into price, the Australian RRP of these from Citizen directly is 999 Australian dollars, but we all know you don't pay RRP for anything, and especially not Citizen Group products. Chris didn't pay RRP, he paid half of that. He paid $499 for his through an authorized dealer. What's the price on a Seiko then? Well, kind of similar. $599 was the best price I could find today, but yeah, weekend flash sale type things, these pop up at $499 occasionally also. Now, I think the dimensions though on the Citizen are really interesting, a bit of a departure for the brand to be honest, and one of the big factors that is going to determine for most people which way you go, Seiko or Citizen. How many times have you looked at a Citizen online and thought, yeah, that's great, and then looked at it and been like, oh, it's 43 with 21 mil lug width, how bloody awkward. Well, not here. This is 40 millimeters in diameter, 13.5 mil thick with a 44.5 lug to lug. That is a really compact set of dimensions. 20 mils between the lugs. The bracelet actually flares out. It starts at 22, tapers down to 18. As sized for Chris, I would probably take one link out if I was buying one of these for myself. One more link out, I should say. 156 grams. 200 meters of water resistance, somewhat overkill for a pilot's chronograph, but there you go, it's part of the ProMaster line. Flat sapphire crystal with beveled edge and no anti-reflective undercoating, and the movement in the back, we already know it's a B620. Now that is of course an eco-drive solar quartz movement, but it doesn't have the old service center only, do not open on the case back, which I must admit is slightly disappointing. It does have the usual spec sheet though, including a bit of magnetic resistance to sapphire crystal and that enormous level of water resistance. Standard eco-drive parameters with that one then, plus or minus 20 seconds per month variance and 6 months of charge when fully loaded. It's a fifth of a second chronograph timer, the central chronograph hand, activated by the top pusher. You never quite get the same lovely snap that you do from a mechanical chronograph, but then again, you don't get too many mechanical chronographs for this price. You have a ticking small second indicator down there at the 6 o'clock, the 6 o'clock sub-register, 60-minute chrono timer over there at the 9, and the 24-hour sub-dial, everyone's favourite, at the 3 o'clock. Once more to stop, once more to reset, and that is your lot. Both the case of the watch and the bracelet have quite a bit more going on than the equivalent finish level on a Seiko. Vertical brush on the side here, but a high polished chamfer on the lugs, and of course this slide rule bezel, which is a friction bezel, by the way, bidirectional friction bezel, with all of those slide rule markings, which I'm sure all of us will use in our daily lives. That one is IP coated here as well. Now the bracelet, Actually rather nice. Look at those kind of curves on the links. It's very, very comfortable in operation. Pin and collar system, which gets it minus 10 points, just like the Seiko. Brushed upper surface, but there is a high polish leading or trailing edge, depending on your perspective. And the same kind of central push button, branded, stamped, fold over clasp. Milled scissor though, but unfortunately, only 2-position adjustment. Now, there's not a lot of space between those 2 positions. Fairly sizable links, meaning you're probably going to be wearing this one either tight or loose. Let's go macro then and have a look at the dial and the hands. And it's a watch of 2 halves, Jim. If you look at the dial itself, the main flat dial surface with the sub-registers and the hands, I really like it. I like this rich leaf green color. I like the sunburst effect on that main dial surface. Tiny little bit of color from the chronograph hand. I love those high polished silver rings around each of the 3 sub-registers. They actually go very nicely with the sunburst. They give the central dial a bit of a lift, a touch of extra class that the speed timer certainly does not have. Similarly, the beveled edge date complication squeezed in there at the 430 is nicely done at least. And you've got those concentric circles on each of the 3 sub-registers. One thing that Citizen does so much better than Seiko is hiding their photovoltaic cells. Looking at this, even under macro, you wouldn't know it was a solar watch, whereas the speed timer, you always get that kind of purple hue from the sub-registers, and you can see what's going on behind them in a way that you simply can't with the Citizen. Handset's nice and simple, kind of classy, high-polished sword hands, beveled down the middle, loads of space for Lume on them as well, as you'll see shortly. Citizen brand logo, Eco Drive, and the ProMaster logo and water resistance just printed on though in white, which is quite clearly the second color after green used on this Navihawk. And then we get to the chapter ring and the bezel, and that's where things perhaps get a little bit too intense for my personal tastes. There's not nearly as much going on here as with some of Citizen's other models. The old Blue Angels was pretty hectic, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of printed markers on both the chapter ring and the bezel. 99.9% of the people buying this watch will have no interest in the utilization thereof at any point, I have no doubt. So they then become a stylistic choice. Do you like this intense style? Do you like a slide rule bezel? Do you appreciate the busyness? Or do you yearn for something less complicated? Perhaps that more than any other single factor will determine which of the 2 big brand Japanese chronos is the right one for you. Before we get the watch on wrist, let's check out the Lume, and we have a kind of green colored Lume here, which is slightly unusual, but I guess it does go rather nicely with the green color dial. Now you only get Lume on the 2 main hands and the hour markers. You don't get any Lume on the sub registers, so you're not going to be using the chronograph after dark. I always say that Seiko gets a 7 out of 10 for Lume. I'm going to give this Citizen a 7 out of 10 for Lume as well. It definitely gets more than a 7 out of 10 for on-wrist comfort though. This bracelet is so much better than the one on the Seiko. Much nicer. These links feel really sturdy. The whole watch feels quite solid. I wish they had added a couple of extra micro adjust holes into the clasp though. Have a look at how the links kind of stagger themselves when the bracelet is pulled taut. That's because they're designed not to sit flat, they're designed to curve to the wrist. Very well done, Citizen. Overhead legibility. Well, it's a 40mm chronograph with a bezel and an angled chapter ring and 3 sub-registers. Thank goodness for those lume-filled sword hands. They really do kind of save the day in that regard. Contrast of the sub-dial hands against the sub-dials is not too bad though, so you can get a decent read on them at a glance from arm's length as well. Moans and niggles. Well, let me start with an observation. My cynical mind cannot help itself. 200 meters of water resistance, but only a push-pull crown. I cannot for the life of me remember reviewing a watch over the last 8 years that had that same combination. I've reviewed plenty of 100 meters with push-pull crowns, but let's just say the seals inside here must be fantastic to facilitate those 2 things in combination. I'm not suggesting that Citizen are lying to us. They're far too big and far too Japanese a brand to do that, but yeah, not seen it before. And the clasp, yeah, it's a bit of a weak point. I'm sure they could have worked in an extra hole of micro adjustment here. The hole on the left actually could move at least a millimeter further left, allowing the addition of another hole in between them, just giving a bit more room, a bit bit more flexibility and a better chance of getting a better fit therefore. But sadly, it didn't happen. And my other two complaints are purely subjective, so please do take them both as such. It looks a little bit small, this watch. 40mm with that big bezel and that angled chapter ring. Yeah, you don't get a lot of dial space, plus you put the 3 sub-registers on it. It feels a little bit smaller than even a 40. It looks a little bit smaller than even a 40, and I've always felt that chronographs are best at around 41 to 42, or therefore it gives everything a bit more room to breathe on the dial. I think therefore this one compares more naturally to the smaller of the two speed timers, the 39.5mm version of Seiko's watch. If you've been looking at the larger speed timer, stick with the Seiko. If you've been considering the smaller speed timer, this Citizen is definitely a viable option for you. And my second subjective observation, as discussed, is the intensity of the hash marks all over the chapter ring and the bezel insert, none of which I would ever use. I prefer a slightly cleaner chronograph look, in which case, if you also think like me, you should probably have a look at their Zenshin chronograph. Very different in style to this one. Obviously doesn't have the water resistance and it's more expensive, but definitely a cleaner, less intense look than the Navihawk. But like I said, they are purely subjective observations. This is a really solid offering from Citizen. It is nice to see them do something in a slightly smaller size, even though it's not to my personal taste. Very good build quality, good quality on the bracelet. I will never say no to an Eco Drive movement. I think chronos are best in this solar quartz at this price point anyway. And a couple of really classy looking touches with this one. Love the shade of green, love the sunburst, and love those rings around the very well concealed photovoltaic sub-registers. So good job, Citizen. You may not have made the outright #1 Japanese chronograph under $500, but the Navihawk is absolutely up there with the best of them. So there you have it. I wouldn't say there was much really to split the two watches, the Seiko and the Citizen. It really comes down to sizing preference and styling preference. So if you were looking for something in between the two speed timers and you're okay with this kind of intense Thule style of chronograph, then by all means go for it. It might be too small for some though, in which case stick to the speed timer. Well done for making it all the way to the end of the video. I do like that speed timer. I bought 2 of them. Why don't you watch reviews of those over there? Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you again in the next one.